Hi, everybody. My name is Shani Reichman. I'm the director of IPF Atid, which is the Young Professionals Network of Israel Policy Forum, an organization dedicated to a secure, Jewish, and democratic Israel. I've been working with Moria Alum, who you'll meet in a second, to bring Israeli activists into American Jewish spaces and vice versa. This is part of a broader initiative we're working on to create stronger partnerships between Americans and Israelis with shared values who want to support liberal democracy. She's going to share with you a little bit more about that and how we ended up here. So today we're grateful to be joined by Uri Keidar, Inbal, Orpaz, and Moria Alum. I'll read their bios to you now. Uri is a longtime friend of the organization. He's the executive director of Israel Hofsheet, the largest advocacy organization in Israel in the field of religious freedom and Jewish pluralism. Israel Hofsheet works with members of Knesset, ministers, and other government officials to promote liberal policies in the field of religion and state, and also promotes change through municipal politics and change makers trainings. The organization also creates national campaigns that move the needle around public opinion on these ideas. Before this role, Uri spent over 7 years in leading positions in civil society organizations and politics, both in elected and professional positions. I'll just add that everyone's bio is a lot longer and more impressive, but I shortened them all. Inbal Orpaz is a strategic innovation consultant and the founder of Women in Tech, of the Women in Tech Initiative, and one of the leaders of the high-tech protest movement. She's a visiting researcher at the Institute for National Security Studies, INSS, and a senior high-tech correspondent for The Marker. She was elected to the Forbes 30 Under 30 list in 2017 and to the list of the 100 most influential people in the Israeli high-tech of geek time in 2015. She holds an MBA from Tel Aviv University and participated in the International Exchange Student Program at NYU. She also holds a BA in Film Studies and Economics from Tel Aviv University. Moria Alum is an expert in foreign policy, the Middle East, US-Israel relations, and national security. She is a diversity, equity, inclusion global lead at Google and a board member at Forum Dvorah, Women in Foreign Policy and National Security. She previously served as chief of staff to former Deputy Foreign Minister Idan Rol, managing strategic processes and spearheading efforts to enhance US-Israel relationships, regional cooperation, and public diplomacy. She holds a master's degree in public affairs at MPA from Princeton School of Public and International Affairs. So thank you all for joining us. Before we start, a few important housekeeping reminders. We very much want to encourage your questions. You can post your questions in the chat or send them directly to me. We will have a dedicated time for Q&A towards the end of our session. So now I'm going to turn it over to Mor, who's going to share why she's so invested in this movement and provide a little bit of background for all of us. Mor, you're muted.
It's so funny that after so long, that still happens.
And you asked me if I was new to Zoom.
I know. It's all it's because of my arrogance. Well, here you go. Thank you, Shani, and thank you, IPF, for your partnership. And of course, everyone, thank you for tuning in today. So what I'm going to do is very, very briefly try and discuss the law proposals that got us to where we are today. It's usually referred to as a judicial overhaul, but it has different names to different people, depending who you are and what you think about the reform. So first, I'll start. In the past few months of the 25th Knesset, thousands of law proposals were submitted. Of that, about 150 were changes to the governing system in Israel that this coalition is promoting. I'm not going to discuss 150 law proposals, but I will touch on 4. What I think are the 4 most dramatic ones that most people know about and are concerned about. But we do have to keep in mind, there is more in the pipeline. And what we have witnessed until now is only the beginning of the Levin and Rothman's long-term plan for the governing system in Israel. So I want to take us back to January 2023, just less than 4 months ago, when this government was established. Once the ministerial appointments started to come out, many of us in the liberal camp became wary of what's to come. But honestly, most of us did not and could not imagine that we'll end up where we are today. So back then, Yariv Levin, the newly appointed Minister of Justice, presented 4 initiatives for radical reform in the judicial system. The first of one, I'm sure that a lot of you are familiar with them. I just want to make sure we touch base and that everyone are on the same page. So the override clause. The override clause is meant to limit the Supreme Court's judicial review, meaning the court's ability to strike out laws passed by the Knesset in cases that the court finds that it clashes with basic laws, or if the court finds it to be unconstitutional. So the override clause will allow the Knesset to reintroduce and pass a law that the Supreme Court has struck out. And that is where the simple majority of 61 that matters to a lot of people, because it allows any coalition, because it's the minimum number for a coalition in Israel, allow any coalition to use it at any point. And in that, it also significantly weakens the court and strengthens the coalition and the government, which is not really separated fully in the Israeli system. The second is canceling the extreme unreasonableness standard. I'm going to use the term reasonability test because the first one is very hard for an Israeli to pronounce. Please forgive me. So the reasonability test allows the court to overrule government decisions if it finds these decisions to be unreasonable. So the purpose generally is to prevent the government from passing entirely arbitrary decisions. I don't know if you are aware, but this clause was very recently exercised, and the court ruled out that it was unreasonable to appoint Aryeh Deri to a minister for this position after he got convicted twice. And as a part of his latest plea bargain, he committed to exit public life. So under the new reform, that Aryeh Deri could become and be appointed to a minister position, and the court will not be able to exercise the reasonability test. And again, that weakens the judiciary and strengthens the government, and specifically the coalition. Third, the plan also includes changes to the status and appointment procedure of legal advisors in the government. So basically, government ministers would be able to appoint their own legal advisors, which is not in their authority today, by the way. The legal advisors would also lose completely their ability to make binding decisions. So they're basically only able to give and to issue advice. So the appointment today is a professional process. The reform would make it purely political appointment, which means the decision will be according to a political overview and perception, and not according to the rule of law. Last, but well, maybe least, changing the composition of the Judicial Selection Committee, which is a major one. Currently, the committee is made up of representatives of all branches of the government. You have 2 ministers, one of them is Minister of Justice, 2 Knesset members, traditionally at least one is from the opposition, and 3 Supreme Court justices, as well as 2 representatives of the Israel Bar Association. Okay, so that's 9. And currently, in order to pass a candidate, you need 7 out of 9 members. So in that case, you have to have political support to appoint judges. Okay, there is a concept that the people supporting the reform like to use, that in Israel, judges appoint themselves. It is not true. Currently, politicians cannot appoint judges without support of the judiciary, but the judiciary also cannot appoint judges without political support. So the reform wants to change this composition. So the coalition has a clear majority of the Judicial Selections Committee, and by that, it will grant the coalition and, of course, the government the power to unilaterally appoint judges in all levels. And that will clearly lead to a politicization of the judicial system. Because judges will know that in order to progress in their careers, they need to rule in the sense that supports the political agenda. And overall, these changes in Israel, referred as the Hafecha Mishpatit, the legal revolution, or maybe even regime change, we perceive them as extremely harmful toward democracy. I'm briefly going to touch on there are 5 pillars for democracy. So you have separation of power, independent judicial system, free elections, effective protection of human rights, and the rule of law. So this reform will harm the judicial, the separation of power, because it gives an already powerful coalition even more power. It will completely destroy the independence of the judiciary, and it will pretty much cancel the court's ability to safeguard human rights and the rule of law. So, as we said, these are not the only terrible laws that this coalition wants to pass, but these are the main ones who got hundreds of thousands of people out to the street week after week for 12 weeks straight. So now, to share more about the protest movement, I want to hand this over to Uri Keidar. So Uri, if you can please share a little bit about how the protest started, what was your involvement in the protest movement, and what do you think about the impact until now?
Okay, hi everyone. I will start with a disclaimer. Everything that I have to say is up to date to the last time that I saw my phone. I see this now happening. Like, I went out of a meeting yesterday to find out. I'm here in the States for the last couple of days. I went out of a meeting yesterday to find out that President Biden said what we all heard he said, that pretty much everything that I said in the meeting now has a different angle to it. So this is my disclaimer. Everything that I say is up to date till a few minutes ago when I last saw something that happened outside of this Zoom call. And while this might be like sounding funny, but this is the realm that we're living in right now. The chain of events is changing by less than an hourly basis sometimes. It's very, very hard to keep track, while at home, it's harder to keep track when it's happening in Hebrew. And I'm sure that for a lot of people here, you get up in the morning and you say that like something that happened overnight already started, already ended, already there's a bunch of new things. So just so you'll know, like, you do not have a problem. Like, we have a problem in reality. It's not like something that happens with a perspective. It's hard to sort of summarize the protest movement as of now, mainly because it's rapidly changing. I do want to say that I believe that this is a defining moment in Israeliness. It's going to be a defining moment in our history. It's going to be a defining moment for our nation. And also, and that might sound weird, the current situation, I think that it's going to be a very positive note in our history. And maybe I'm too hopeful. That also might be the case. And maybe I'm too emotionally involved. That's for sure the case. But this is how I see it right now. And we're talking about protests that started somewhat like 2.5 months ago, which I want to say, going back to what More started, brought me back to 2019. In 2019, I was sitting in a meeting after one of the election rounds. I still don't remember what it was. We had a few, as you might remember. I was sitting with colleagues of mine who are leaders of civil society organizations, and we were banging our heads against the wall, trying to understand how will we explain the override clause to the public. No one cares about constitutional law. It's a huge amendment, and it's going to change the way the country works. But we were fighting ourselves to figure out how do we frame it? How do we explain it? How do we make people care? And in this situation, I think it's also important to say thank you to the coalition. They went towards an all-out assault on Israeli democracy that pretty much made everyone understand that this is the moment to get off the fence and be active in something. And when we're talking about the protest movement, its visible, more visible sides, of course, are the rallies, in Kaplan, are the rallies pretty much everywhere around the country. I live in a kibbutz not far from the airport, and I see the people in my mom's generation, hundreds of them, storming the nearby junction, which is unfortunately not a very important one in the country. And they're now doing it 3 times a week. People coming who are unable to walk, who are just standing in a junction and holding a flag. but they are part of the protest movement. We're seeing the protest movement here in the US with every government speaker being chased around by hundreds of activists throughout here in the States. We see it pretty much wherever they are present. And as Inbal will soon talk to you about the tech industry part in the protest movement, we see that with IDF reservists from very different ranks, units, etc. So the protest movement right now are like, I think it's not even something I can really define, but it's going stronger. It's getting more and more people engaged. We're seeing people who really in my personal circles are, I think that saying that they're not political activists is undermining what they're really not. Like some of you already heard him say that on the second Saturday of this round of demonstrations, I got a phone call from a friend. It was the afternoon before the night of the rally of umbrellas in Rothschild Boulevard. A friend of mine who just asked me, am I going to the protest? And I said, yeah, of course I'm going. And then he was like, okay, so how are you going? And it looked very weird for me. And it's someone who I know from home. We've been friends forever, since we were kids. And I told him, I don't know, like, I don't understand the question. I'm getting into my car in the kibbutz. I'm driving to Tel Aviv. I'm parking it as far as I can to not get stuck on my way back. And I think you're like asking me a technical question, but it's really not a technical question. You really have no idea how this happens. So first of all, I'm very happy to see you do that. It's a friend whose last decade of life was invested in becoming a doctor. He's a therapist. He has a PhD in psychology. That's his life. When we came to Rothschild Boulevard with our umbrellas and got to the protest, he asked me, okay, so what are we doing now? We are standing here. You can chant if you want. You can yell if you want. It's socially acceptable. But this is what we're doing. And you have so many people of those sceneries now in Israeli demonstrations that it's pretty unbelievable. And as for the organization, we are part of sort of a bigger group of organizations spearheaded by the national headquarters of the protest, which is somewhat of a network of people. It has a leadership, a very impressive leadership, which we're happy to help by different means. And mainly, I want to say that I think that our part in this game so far is helping people understand that the judicial coup that they're trying to make our country go through is not an end. And the end, pretty much a lot of religious coercion, which is what we deal with. It's making people become not equal citizens of the country, and it's overhauling the country altogether. And it's very important, I think, also in the situation in which we are now, in which we are engaged with constitutional law in an unprecedented way, and the terms that More just explained are something that day-to-day Israelis are not discussing as if they are law students, which they are not. I'm also not a law professor or do not have any legal education. But it's important to understand what can be done with those unlimited powers that the government is trying to grab. And mostly, and again, I think that that's another moment to say thank you to the government. They put it all in front of us. They helped us all understand that then when they are talking about making people not equal, they truly mean it. And in that way, I will say something that might be sensitive to the audience, but I'll say it anyway. We also have the ability to look at what happened here in the States and to see that when for years and years, the extreme right went to a full attack on Roe versus Wade, telling that they are going to change the ruling and that women will be unable to get abortions in nearly half of the world's biggest and most liberal beacon of democracy, as it looks from the outside. We need to take them very seriously. They definitely mean every single thing that they're saying. They will come out after our very basic rights. And I'll conclude with that mainly by saying that we're at the point of the protest in which it's a crucial moment, but also I think with a very huge achievement under the belt of the protest so far, because from day one, we all understood and we all said, there will be no stop in the parliament. The parliament and the opposition is unable to legally stop the situation from evolving. They do not have the power. The coalition has a strong majority. They are a very coherent coalition internally, and we will need the street to make them stop. And I think that this is exactly the point in which we are. And also important to be said, that also happened because of a lot of pressure coming from the American Jewish community, from internationals around the world, but specifically from people in this side of the ocean, making sure that their voices are heard, making sure that the pressure is felt, going out of their skin and doing things that they never imagined that they will do, saying things that they never imagined that they will say. And I think we cannot underestimate how important the support that the protest movement is getting from US Jewry is. And I'll stop here for now and probably hear more.
Thank you, Uri. So Inbal, I'm passing the torch on to you. You're involved. We would love for you to share a little bit more about the high-tech protest movement. Usually people or companies with economic interests do not get involved in politics this easily. So if you could share a little bit about the motivation, about the organization, and your assessed impact.
Sure. So thank you, Mor, and thank you, everyone. And good evening from Tel Aviv. If we've met about 3 months ago, I would introduce myself as a strategic innovation consultant or as a founder of a Women in Tech initiative. But actually in the last almost 3 months, like Uri was talking, I was trying to estimate like how much it has been going on. But for at least 2 months now, I'm almost full-time running the high-tech protest along with hundreds of other people just in this protest. And I would like to share with you a little bit of what is going on in our activity. I would say that people estimated there are around 150 different organizations involved in this protest movement. But I think that the story of the tech protest is really unique. In the past, I used to be a tech journalist. I covered the tech industry, the Israeli tech industry for The Marker. It's part of Haaretz group. It's the financial section of Haaretz. And for me, I was always looking at the tech sector, and I was wondering why this sector, which is so important to the Israeli economy, it's more than half of our export, 10% of the employees were responsible for 25 or even more than 25% of the income tax in Israel. And they don't get involved, or they didn't get involved in Israeli politics. There was one exception. It was in 2018. There was a discussion about LGBTQ rights, and then it was the only example. But in that case, it was something that is, I would say, in the mainstream for the tech people. And now we see an explosion, and I would like to go through what we've done so far. As someone who comes from the tech protest, so I would share my screen and have a short deck, and afterwards I would be happy to provide more information. So when we started this whole thing, we tried to understand like, what is the goal? What is the target of an organization which is involved in this protest and represent the tech sector, the tech employees, the tech investors, the tech companies. And we understood that the tech sector, as I said, is really crucial to the Israeli economy, but it depends on foreign money. Like more than 90% of the money that supports or invested in the Israeli companies is coming from outside Israel. We have more than 300 R&D centers of multinational companies. So we need the relationship with companies and investors from other places. And we understood that once this reform is happening, it will risk the tech sector. And we also understood that in a place that people, they don't feel that they have the freedom, then you cannot find tech or innovation or new things happening. So those were the main things that started this huge movement. We got a lot of support from experts from all around the world who warned, and as Uri said and was talking about the pressure from outside, I would say that it really influenced what is going on. So here you can see a few examples. In the left, you see Nouriel Roubini, and in the middle, you see Larry Summers, and there was a group of economists who all said that what is going to happen is really dangerous for the Israeli economy. We felt that this is also something that supported the things that we said and our warnings. And I would say that it was kind of all of it together. It was kind of game changer, because when you listen to the politician in Israel, they would say, no, the people outside in the protest are anarchists, they're terrorists, but it's really hard to contradict it. Or I would say it's a bit more challenging when you see people from those positions talking like that about what is going on here. So what have we done so far? Today, we have more than 30 protest locations in all the tech industrial areas and centers all around Israel, of course, in Tel Aviv and Petah Tikva and Yokneam and Haifa and all around Israel. You would find people. Usually, we have our protest every Tuesday around noon. You see people going outside. You see some of the photos. From example, in the right side and the bottom, you see a protest in Caesarea. You see the umbrellas, it was in rain. So we started those in Yokneam, for example, is one of our biggest locations outside Tel Aviv. You can find there 500 people going outside protesting. This is something that has never happened before. It's really big. The tech protest also supported other organizations, so other people protesting. So every time now, I think it happened so far 3 times. The 3rd time was this week. So VCs, venture capital funds, and other companies, they arranged a bus transportation to Jerusalem to help people to get to the Knesset, our parliament, and get involved. So you can see the banners of the No Democracy, No High Tech, and Save Our Startup Nation that we put on the buses that took the people to Jerusalem. Every few weeks, we try to have something that you can see the photos here. We had this kind of demonstration of laptops being shut down, and the banner in the back, it says like the garage sale of the high tech. And this is another example talking about the locomotive of the economy, and that the democracy is the gas that supports it. So this was another thing that we did in one of the biggest, what we call, I would say, disruption days, where we stop everything and we disrupt the traffic, we disrupt the day-to-day life. So usually we try to arrange something like this early in the morning, and then those photos, they encourage more people to go outside and be part of it. Here you can see like the time is running out for the tech sector. That was the latest one that we did. It was last week. This photo was taken maybe at 7 a.m. or maybe 6 something. And you see there were so many people who came to support this demonstration. So it's really impressive. And you see the people are really engaged into it. You see people from the tech protest also participating in the Knesset committees. Here in the photo, you see me with, in the middle, it's a VC, and in the right is an entrepreneur. He runs a food tech company. And we all go to different committees and trying to make our voice here being heard in those committees, and trying to convey our messages. And we also cooperate with other organizations. For example, here you see the red shirts. It's the tech protest along with the women protest. So we understand that we are stronger together and we're trying to work with other organizations. In the right side, you see a demonstration that we organized in Be'er Sheva along with the other health protest organizations. So we are trying to work all together and being aligned, even though we don't always agree on everything, but you can see behind the scene, we work closely with all organizations or with most organizations. And here's another example of something that we organized, like when we said that we have the disruption day. So you see that we had a demonstration, tech demonstrations all around the country, in the north, and in the south, and in the center, and in every location we had people coming. It became really big. And this organization, what keeps it moving is a huge infrastructure of people who are volunteering and helping building this organization. So there are people who are just, part of our WhatsApp groups. We have a huge network. We have around, I think right now it's 15K or even more than this of people only on our WhatsApp group, and they all get updates and being involved. And we have also an initiative called the Protest Code. It's volunteers from tech companies, developers, engineers, and they support the different protest organizations. They come, they bring up what they need, for example, an infrastructure to collect data, to build website, whatever they need. They come, they ask the Protest Code, the organization or initiative to help them, and they develop it for them. It's another example of how we cooperate with other organizations. We have representatives in many companies, and they run internal communities or groups of people who are involved in the protest, and they all work in the same companies. And this is how we grow and scale the organization. The media, both you see here the global media, Reuters and Bloomberg, but also the Israeli media, of course. The story of the tech protest, it became one of the major narratives, I would say, because it is so unique, because it's so crucial to Israel. I think along with other organizations, we mentioned some of them. I think this is one of the biggest maybe surprises and also interesting stories during this protest. And now all of us are in this situation that we're trying to understand what's now. So this is the laundry that I did yesterday. Like, it was a very hectic week, and maybe every week is hectic and every week feels like a peak. But this week was something else. We had things that had never happened before in Israel. So now we are in this kind of pause, I would say. We're trying to understand, like, if the negotiation is going anywhere, but still we are still very aware, and everyone is waiting, and the protests, they keep going. On this Saturday, on Shabbat, we will all go to Kaplan, to Tel Aviv, and in other locations, and we're still now we're trying to build and prepare for the next step of the protest. And for those of you who speak, read Hebrew, you are very welcome to follow our channels. Unfortunately, right now it's only in Hebrew. And that's it for now.
Wonderful. Thank you for that wonderful update. We have a question in the chat that I think is that you touched upon at the end, Inbal, and can add on to it. And Mor and Ori, you're invited to join in as well. The question is, since the overhaul has been postponed until after Pesach, is it fair to say the protests have been a success, or is it too early to tell? And I also want to know more about what this next month looks like for all of you in your activism and in the building stage, since we know what's to come in a month, potentially.
Okay, I would start with maybe with the tactics. Just before this Zoom, I had a call, like strategic call, trying to understand, like, what should we do now? And I have to say that this situation is new to all of us. Nothing like it has ever happened before, and we have to try to understand, like, what to do, what should we do? And the way that we see it is maybe if we are optimistic and everything goes as planned, so we would have now Passover and then Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Memorial Day, and then we will have that Independence Day, and it will give us some time to rearrange and to build the organization and to understand like how the mechanism is going to work, because everything is happening so fast and we have to build the organization. So, and in the meantime, we understand that we would keep on going with the protest, but it would be not as strong as it was in the last few weeks. It was really like an emergency. Like the way that I see it, I think that, you know, all of us who live in Israel and we are used to have a war or an operation, you know, once in a few years. So we have this mindset that now it's wartime or now it's an emergency time. The last few weeks for me, it was like rockets hitting, you know, Tel Aviv or all over Israel, and it's emergency time, and we had, you know, to do everything fast and to act. But now it's like, okay, now it's quiet, and we have to rearrange. But all the time we know that something might happen, and it might happen very fast. And I can say that it feels that, you know, people on the ground, they want to do something. Like, for example, yesterday in the afternoon, I was in the protest outside in Rothschild Boulevard. And on my way back, it should be like, you know, a postponed or a pause or, you know, however you call it. And every other person who saw me stopped me and was like, where are we protesting today? Like, what is happening today? People, like when you talk to them, they don't feel that we have to stop or that something has changed. People are very suspicious. People know that the people who lead the negotiation right now is already, unfortunately, lied to the public. So people are very suspicious. So I would say that in one hand, like we are trying to rearrange and to build our capabilities. On the other side, we are very aware and prepared, you know, to go back outside to the street whenever something is happening.
Yeah, I have a sense, I feel like I've repeated this sentence over the last few days, that I feel like we won the battle, but we still have a very long war ahead of us. And it's really terrible that I to use this like militaristic terms, right? Because we're not in war. It's our own people. Like we want to, at the end of this, to live in peace of some sort. But we do understand that, for me at least, I feel that there's now time, like Inbal said, to breathe for a second and reorganize and regroup. It's pretty clear that the supporters of the reform are doing the same thing. So we have no time to lose. And even though we can breathe for a minute, it doesn't grant, we don't have the privilege to stop initiating and stop organizing and stop building the infrastructure for long-term impact and support of the Israeli democracy and liberal values in Israel. So personally, I am involved with Shani and I are trying to think about this strategically on the U.S.-Israel side, that after today is even more in dire need, because we as soon as the elections happened, it was clear to me that we are losing a lot of our friends around the world, but specifically within the Jewish American community. It's just reinforcing a lot of changes and trends that are already occurring without this crazy government. And we want to make sure that we bring and create alliances among liberals who want and are able to promote liberal values and liberal policies together.
I want to say that, first of all, like, we are in a situation in which I totally agree with the analysis so far. We have a long way ahead, and we have things we need to consider as sort of building blocks for the success of the protest, but also for the success of the liberal camp in Israel. We see this situation. It's really unprecedented, and in a way, I think it can and should be the first sort of floor of a higher building that will be the realignment of powers in Israel. Mainly because and again, coming from an organization that fights religious coercion, I think that one of the most important driving powers of everything that's happening now is also how this coalition is built. The coalition is built from half of it are religious parties, some of it purely Kahanist parties, um, male dominated in an unprecedented way in the 21st century, at least. People who are genuinely anti-liberal values, anti-women, anti-LGBT, upfront, without excuses, without making even a small attempt to disguise their real self. And in that sense, we should use the current situation as an ability to actually strengthen our own work for the foreseeable future. And just to give you a few examples, Israel is going to have a nationwide municipal elections in October. We need to make sure that those elections are treated like US midterms, and that those elections are an opportunity to make a stop to the government and to allow people to understand that mayors, who, by the way, are very, very active in this fight so far in really unbelieved ways that never happened in Israel before, are being part of the solution to the problem, which is the current government. And also when we're looking at the situation between Israel and American Jews and other partners of ours in the world, I think that for all of us, it's also an opportunity to reimagine Israel. We've seen really in ways that haven't happened in the world before, the center left reclaiming national symbols. You've seen like hundreds of thousands of Israeli flags, people reclaiming the Declaration of Independence. You've seen the right become angry at people who are marching with flags. And it's just, I think, an opportunity to understand that this is a different moment than ever before. We're seeing really shifts and realignments in our politics. We're seeing new partnerships being built. We're seeing a new way to look at the country. And I think that's also the case for people who are watching Israel from the outside. I, again, will be blunt. We are kicking their ass at the moment in ways that were unbelievable. I think that when all of us were standing there with the umbrellas, if you would have told us that in 2.5 months, this is what's going to happen, we would have said that you were like losing it, and good for you, but maybe you should get someone to help. And this is where we are. And I think we have a huge challenge in sort of building the next steps and to build our internal capacities and to build the future of the protest, not just being a protest that hopefully will stop the most significant attack on Israeli democracy that we ever encountered, but also to build a political camp for the future. We need to make sure that these people are no longer in control of our lives. I do not want to be in a situation in which my 3 kids are raised in a country in which these are the people that they see when they look up to. I have a 7-year-old girl. I have no intention of raising her in a situation in which really like unbelievably fundamentalist people are running our Ministry of Education, are in charge of my children's values. That's not going to happen. We will win this fight. And we, I think, are at least at this point looking at a future that doesn't look like our past. And in that way, we can, I think, and will need to capitalize in the current situation. And it's also, I think, an opportunity, and as Mor and Shani are already pushing forward with their initiative and their project, to re-envision what it means to be building back the relationship between the Israeli liberal camp and its partners in the world. And also needs to be said, although it was talked about recently in many, many ways, in rooms, in the press, etc., that we need to make sure that the alliances between the hardcore American right and our Michiganers do not continue to actually control our lives. They're importing things that are un-Israeli, that are really like they want us to get into abortion discussions. They want us to get into the gun discussions. And I want to say that we definitely have enough problems of our own, and we do not need to import problems from other countries. So I think that it's just the moment for that.
I would like, if that's okay, to mention another opportunity that I think it's really something new that people have never discussed before. I would say that we started with one goal, which was to stop this legalization. And I feel, and when I listen to people in the street, the goal has changed. Now people understand that we really have to save the Israeli democracy, and people started talking about building or creating a constitution for Israel. We were supposed to have a constitution, but it has never happened before. And for example, yesterday when I was in the protest, people were shouting, "Chukah, chukah, העם רוצה חוקה," meaning constitution, constitution, the people want constitution. I've been in protests in Israel for, I don't know, for how many years by now. And now it's the first time that people are really talking. They say, no, we're not going to stop until we have a constitution. Now, it's not realistic because it is a long process, and maybe it would be like the main idea or the main theme of the next elections. But this is something that people are starting to talk about. I think this is one of the opportunities that we have right now.
Great. We have a few more questions in our last 10 minutes. Someone asked if there are protests in the US, so I'll just answer that there are. My colleague Max is going to put a link in the chat to the Unacceptable Facebook page. I will say that having been to the ones in New York, which are really wonderful, there's one this Sunday in Washington Square Park at noon for those interested. But American Jews don't hear about them. It's like 95% Israelis because it's in one of those very large Israeli WhatsApp groups where it's bombarded all the time and everything is in Hebrew. So, but we are there. There have been some changes lately, so I'm hoping that more American Jews who do not speak Hebrew will start coming, and you can get the link in the chat. The other question is about, let's see. The other question is regarding how to communicate that people should still be pro-Israel in the US, despite the current government, which I think is something that's actually a lot easier now in a lot of ways because Israelis are taking to the streets, because it's so clear that the government is not representative of the Israeli people in a serious way. From my perspective, it's actually far simpler to say, look, there's 500,000 Israelis in the streets. 20% of Israelis have protested this. This government clearly doesn't represent them. I think in some ways that actually makes that job easier. But if anybody has anything to add on that front.
Yeah, I feel that even before this government, my goal was for people to connect and understand Israelis and not necessarily continue this. I think people, I mean, I've worked in public diplomacy in my previous job. Like I was working on all the different previously known as Hasbara methods, and they're all important. But I feel like at this time, I feel like American liberals can definitely identify with us taking to the streets. I definitely think that the very easy comparison between Netanyahu and Trump help with that. I'm not sure that people think about it because when you, no one in the world thought that the US is less great and less liberal and less of a democracy when Trump was the president. And of course, the American democracy and the democratic system is stronger than Israel. But still, I feel like at this point, I'm grateful that we are still a strong democracy, and the number of people marching the streets is a proof of that.
I also want to say, I saw that there is a question in the chat about Gantz and Lapid and their representation in the negotiation. I want to say that unlike previous rounds, at least until now, I think that the Israeli liberal camp did a fantastic job in not collapsing into its own internal deliberation.
Yeah.
Hopefully it will stay. And mainly I want to say that one of the most important tools that we now have, and one of the most important weapons that we can use, is the fact that the protest is very decentralized. There isn't, like, when they're asking, like, you will stop, we will negotiate only if you will stop the protest, the answer is like, that can't happen. Like, no one's able to pull the plug. Like, it just does not exist. Too many people are holding the keys to the protest. It's really fantastic. And I want to say that the situation is way
Ricky.
I believe that Lapid and Gantz, etc., at the negotiation table, I want to say really a negotiation table. And evolve will have not working.
So maybe in the meantime, I would say that on Friday morning, people are organizing a protest outside Gantz's house. And in the internal conversation of the leaders of the protest organization, you would see, people say they don't represent us. They can say whatever they want. They don't represent us. And some of them, you can feel that they're very angry about them. So I think that, as I said before, the people are suspicious. They don't trust, the process now of the negotiation. Clearly, people don't trust Netanyahu, but they are very suspicious also when it comes to Lapid and to Gantz, and they're, very looking after everything that they do. So I think the answer would be suspicious mostly.
I'll just for those who don't know, Ori is taking this call from the IPF offices, the other room from me. So it's our fault with the Wi-Fi, but he looks like he's switched computers.
Yeah, I just switched computers. So just to say that, to conclude, I think that I totally agree with Inbal, and I also think that the protest will test the results of the negotiation. And I want to also say that we need, again, at least from my perspective, to keep a political option on the table. Like, we will, eventually we need to take over the government. We need to be the government ourselves. We need our values to lead the Israeli government. And I wanna say that in that realm, like, we'll have to wait and see, and the burden of the proof is on them. And I also saw another question about,
I want to touch on this just before you jump off. I'm going to give the other perspective of it. Well, first, I'm politically affiliated with Yesh Atid. I work with Lapid. I work with the party. I appreciate them a lot, and I just trust them and the people they've appointed to the negotiation. And I will say that is, I feel that the negotiation for whatever they want to do now is in a sense separated from the people. Why? Because the protests were not motivated by politics. In the beginning of it, I don't know if you remember, I don't know if you were involved back then, but in the beginning, the first protests, the organizers asked the politicians not to come, and they wouldn't let them speak on the stage because it was initiated and organized, and the motivation were coming from the people in a different organization. I feel like they're trying to organize this, like the supporters of the reform, protests as well now, and that only came when Netanyahu himself tried to push for the Likud supporters to go to protest. That is a completely different story here. Inbal and I had a conversation beforehand if the protests were spontaneous or if they were organized, and I was convinced by Inbal's stand that it was very, very spontaneous. And you saw how spontaneous it was on the night that Gantz was fired. It was spontaneous that in less than an hour, hundreds of thousands of people left their house after 10 p.m., and went to protest and stayed there until the middle of the night. And no one could foresee it. And we talked before about the impact of the protests. I think that the experience of going each and every week, sometimes multiple times a week, have led to the moment where people were angry and they knew what to do. And that had an impact. So just briefly say, I do believe that at least Lapid is representing my interest in this. However, I feel like the public needs to be a part of this discussion. Beyond the fact that we have our own opinions and we have our own voices, we also need to communicate with the other parts of the country who doesn't necessarily agree with us. And I know that that's controversial for some people in the protest, and that's also okay.
I know we're coming up on time, but I think Uri wanted to respond. We had a few questions, and this is apropos because our organization usually deals with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, although now our broader vision is threatened. And there are a lot of questions about what is the role of Palestinian citizens of Israel or Arab Israelis in this conversation, if at all, and also does this shed light on broader democratic issues that go over the green line? So Uri, I don't know if you wanted to say.
Yeah, I want to, first of all, that I'm not speaking on behalf of Palestinian citizens of Israel or anyone else and how they see themselves in the product, like they'll have to ask me. And them, by the way, probably will give you a very wide range of answers. I do want to say that sometimes I'll try to say it in a nice way. Sometimes we're getting questions from people who, why is that not even including more things? I want to say, folks, when you were busy in kicking Trump off being your president, no one was stopping to say, yeah, but also we need to see how will Biden deal with getting out of Afghanistan, okay? Or other foreign issues that you deal with and are important. But we have a knife to our neck at the moment. We need to do whatever we can to make sure that our basic values stop being threatened. Will that bring a change to how Israel is using its power against Palestinians, et cetera, I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. And I want to suggest that at the moment, I get it, that the fact that the flag of Israel is not something that many Arab citizens of Israel identify with, is something that makes this protest look the way it does. But it's also helpful. It's our national symbols. There are now taking part. Calls to the end of the occupation exist somewhere in the protest. It's not a loud voice. It's not a major part of the game at the moment. That's the way it is. I also think that
with the Jewish Partisan Educational Foundation.
We didn't hear that. But I do want to say that this is the protest at the moment. And there's always a tendency on our camp to look at things and say, okay, but it can be even more inclusive. Yes, it can. But at the moment, we're trying to make sure that our very basic values aren't threatened at the level that they are. And I think that just as the liberal camp in the US did everything in its power to make sure that Donald Trump is no longer controlling the strongest country in the world, we need to make sure that the current coalition is no longer pushing its radical agendas down our throat. This is what it is. Yeah, it's not as inclusive as it might be. Yes, it does not speak about the occupation. Yes, it does not give voices to, but at the moment, it's the most successful scene. And I think we have a lot to be proud of and a lot of things that we can definitely improve. But I think it's safe to say we're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, I feel that also just keep in mind that in order to have a liberal government back in the future, we have to win this fight. In order to bring back the question of the two-state solution or some sort of arrangement with Palestine, we need a government that is able to hear that and is able to deal with that. And it's not going to happen if this government continues, and it's especially not going to happen if this coalition will keep all the power and will not have separation of power in Israel And eventually, the last goal is not, again, it's like not just these this part of the reform. The end of it will be to make it more difficult for Arab candidates to run for elections. Like that's something that's on the table too. So we have to remember that. And I think we're out of time. I do want to say something, but anyone else can jump after me and just summarize the way that you would like to. There's so much to do still, and we are now not ashamed to ask for help. Anything that you feel that you can do in your capacity to pressure in a loving and supportive way of the people of Israel and the state of Israel as it should be, please do it. Pressure is okay. It's the first time in my life that I'm inviting pressure from the outside. Definitely very hard for me to do, but we all understand that that's needed, and we are welcoming your support and pressure.
Great. Thank you all. This was really wonderful. Inbal, I don't know if you wanted to add anything before we wrap.
No, as Mar said, we need your help. Everything that you say, people are listening. So keep up.
Wonderful. All right. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.